You're listening to the 49 Carats podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It's Wednesday, June 7th, and joining me today is Weston Smith. You may know him from the We're Talking Football podcast. I actually had the pleasure of joining him this offseason on his podcast, and now he's joining 49K Pod. How are you doing today, Weston?
I'm doing great, Steph. I appreciate you reaching out. Super excited to chat with you today. I know there's a lot of good topics, but I think the most important thing you said is it's June 7th. I want everybody to keep that in mind when we start talking about other things. It's still June 7th.
I like that you mentioned that early because I find myself mentioning that like later in the podcast, almost every episode. I'm like, remember, guys, it started with it's March, then it became it's April. Now we're in June. We're getting closer to the start of the season, but still a lot of things can change, of course. But we're going to talk about what happened today in the second day of 49ers minicamp. This is their last mini camp and their last team practice session until training camp begins towards the end of July. We still don't have an exact date range for training camp quite yet, but the guys are going to go off and do their own thing for about 40 days, and hopefully most of them come back in the same shape they were today or better. But of course, like let's start with the quarterbacks, right? I mean, we always got to start with the hot topics, and that is often the quarterback. So Trey Lance did get the first team reps today, Wednesday, after Sam Darnold took the majority of those Tuesday as they continue to rotate. The overall assessment from today's session was that the defense looked pretty good. Who would have thought, right? I mean, Emil Fergoso, who has been attending these practices as part of the media, he tweeted, quote, 49ers defense was clamps today. Life was hell for all three QBs today. I kind of like that quote because it's like sometimes, it's hard to assess like who's doing well. And if one quarterback does well over another, you're like, oh, then it must be the quarterback. But if all three quarterbacks did, kind of, I don't want to say poorly, but if they made life difficult for all three quarterbacks, I feel like, okay, it was the defense. It was just a defensive day, right?
Yep. I don't think anybody should be, first of all, by the way, clamps is like one of my most favorite terms when you're referring to a defense. It's just like, it's the same thing in the NFL as like calling somebody a dog. It's just like the ultimate compliment. But should anybody be shocked that the defense is outshining this offense? They're further along. There's more continuity there. Candidly, there's a higher skill set, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the ball than there is the offensive side of the ball. I would expect that to be a pretty consistent report and theme, even as we get into August. But I think the biggest takeaway, Steph, as you mentioned, like, hey, all three quarterbacks are struggling. I am struggling as a fan and as somebody who avidly watches this team to kind of read between the lines and interpret like, well, at this point, what are we defining is good and is bad? And because I think we're all hanging on a narrative. We're all looking for an opportunity just to nitpick everything, whether it's Trey Lance. I know we're talking about today, but Trey Lance airmailing a ball boy on the sideline in a drill, right? Like, oh my God, the season's coming to an end. I'd like to see a little bit more from the quarterback. Specifically number 5. I just would hope that he'd be further along year 3. The offense shouldn't be new. The defensive faces he's been facing for 3 years, he should know where they're wandering, their tricks, their baits, all that stuff. But I would expect the defense to continuously dominate the offense throughout the remainder of camp as well.
I wonder if Kyle ever gets annoyed by how good or just frustrated or how good his defense is in these practices. Of course, you love to see it on the field on game days, but sometimes in practice, it's like I just want to see how my quarterbacks are doing. I feel like it might make it harder to assess the quarterback situation. Is like, hey, can you guys chill a little bit? I'm just trying to see something.
Yeah.
But maybe that is what you want to see, right? Maybe you need to see them struggle a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, I go back to the Brock Purdy story at last season, right? When everybody's like, well, why does this guy look good? Why is he so prepared? Well, he was going against arguably the best defense in the league week after week after week after week in practice, right? So maybe the game seemed slower, right? Maybe the competition seemed a little bit less. So here's for positivity and hope that's the same case for 5, 14, and 13 as we get closer to the season.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely could be true because from my perspective, when I was at training camp, Brock Purdy didn't look good, but it could be because he was just going up against the 49ers defense, right? In any case, like we should be encouraged that the 49ers defense continues to look great, and that's something that we should always expect. But something we'll talk more about in a bit, but let's dive deeper on the quarterbacks and just how they did today. We had some clips from previous sessions of the quarterbacks going through the agility bag drill, and you mentioned, the one that circulated about Lance. But the idea of that drill is for quarterbacks to get in the habit of keeping their base and keeping their feet on the ground when they throw, work on their torque, all that. Today, it looked like Brian Greasy tried a bit of a different drill, and I'll share it for you guys for the people watching on YouTube so you guys can see. Um, yeah, so trying something a little bit different with the exercise balls going in the direction of the quarterback to simulate pass rushers. I like that Greasy switches it up, and
Yeah.
I know that some people don't, but I actually like this drill.
I am much more in favor of this drill than the previous drill, right? The concept of the previous drill that we saw clips on,
Yeah,
a base, but also like they're commanding you to release the ball when you're like out of schedule, right? Like when you're a little off step and it's about being able to get it out right there. Similar fashion here, right? This ball's rolling up. You can't just stick that front foot in the ground and plant if you're going to step on the ball, right? So it's about kind of keeping your base, hitting the right step at the right time, even taking a step to the right or to the left to move up in the pocket, quote unquote, up in the pocket to get rid of the ball. But Steph, I think the home run point here for you is that Greasy's not doing the same thing twice, because the reality of this game is you're not going to see the same thing twice. Every team's going to do something differently. Every snap is going to present a different scenario. And we all, everybody who's ever played a sport in their life, doesn't matter what the sport is, has always said that, hey, practice should be harder than the games. So why not? And I love what Greasy's doing.
Yeah, and I understand, like, there's nothing that can prepare a quarterback for the feeling of real pressure. And obviously, like, these balls don't move as quickly as, a defensive end coming off the edge. But I think this drill and even the, agility bag drill that we were talking about, I think they're both intended to habitualize, and I think that's a word, right?
Yeah.
Habitualize the proper foot movement in the pocket, right? So I kind of feel like this drill is kind of the graduation from the agility bag drill, because in that one they were just moving from side to side and trying to keep that base. This one, it's like, okay, now you have things moving towards you. How do you move? How are you setting your feet? Are you still keeping that base like we were teaching you, last week or whatnot? So I like this. I like that it's getting switched around. I like that it's moving up a bit. It's getting harder, I guess, in a sense. Yeah. So I like this drill. I do.
I just like Greasy's plan of attack here in this offseason. This is our first real glimpse of this, right? Because he was kind of a ladder addition last year. And then he got a lot more praise as the season went on. And you saw the maturation of Brock Purdy taking place right in front of your eyes. And like, hey, where is this coming from, et cetera. But to me, Greasy's not taking the foot off the gas on the most important thing for the most important position in all of sports is fundamentals. It's keeping consistent the fundamentals. Here's what we do know about our quarterbacks. From a pure ability standpoint, they're not Patrick Mahomes. They're not Aaron Rodgers, who are throwing the ball 80 yards off a back foot and doesn't matter where that front foot goes. We know that. We don't know a lot, but we know that, and I'm confident in saying that. And I just think, hey, the focus is no matter what the look is, it's about footwork. It's about mechanics. It's about those things, and those things can't fail you. Like you said, when a Bosa is pressuring you in camp or somebody, in a real game. So that's what I love about it. It's just, even though these are professionals, the focus always is hyper focused on fundamental.
Yeah. And Greasy, like when I watched him in training camp last year, I feel like the drills that he was having the quarterbacks work through were tailored to things that they maybe struggled with, a session before, the sessions the week before. And so it's always looking to like improve some of those fundamentals
Yep.
that maybe they were struggling with before. But let's get to the numbers with these quarterbacks. Reports from Grant Cohn, both Lance and Darnold were perfect during 7-on-7s, and both were inconsistent during 11-on-11s. Matt Barrows shared the 11-on-11 numbers for us. Trey Lance was 4 of 8, one of those being a drop. Sam Darnold was 4 of 8 as well, 2 drops. And Brandon Allen, who was apparently to Kyle Shanahan extremely impressive, as he said a day ago, was 1 of 8 in the 11-on-11 portion, and there was 1 drop in that as well. Between both sessions, Lance finished 8 of 12, and he had a 60-yard touchdown pass to Kittle and an interception. Let's talk about the interception real quick, because it is the thumbnail to this video, because I think a lot of people somewhat overreacted to it. It just made people freak out on Twitter because there were a couple of beat writers who tweeted about the interception, which was a pick-6 by Kerry Hyder Jr. And they tweeted about it as soon as it happens, and it made some people feel away, right? And if you hate Lance, you retweeted it instantly because you think Trey Lance throwing a pick in practice confirms your bias. If you love Lance, you probably quote tweeted it because you are wondering why people always want to dog on Lance. They run at the chance to talk badly about him, and it's so funny how people have different perspectives about, essentially like the same thing. Now, I don't know about you, Weston, but I simply think that reporters were doing their job. They were reporting. And the pick-6s, that's a pretty notable play. And if it seemed like beat writers were, I don't know, happy or animated about the interception, I don't think it was because Trey Lance threw the pick-6 so much as it was about Kerry Hyder, as a defensive lineman, catching and holding on to that pass to score. Yeah. I think by all accounts of the people who were there, it sounded like it was a pretty impressive play from Hyder objectively.
Yeah, and again, you and I not necessarily right there on the sideline. By all accounts, just an incredible play. But this goes back to the old stat, why I'm just not a huge fan of statistics in general, right? Because there's no context related to those. You could just as easily be sitting here and say, "Oh, Lance threw a pick this week, today in practice. That fits my narrative, like you just described." But there's no context behind it, whatsoever. Hey, the defense gets paid too. Right? Every once in a while, somebody can make a spectacular play, or, why this sport has been lobbying, when a ball hits a wide receiver dead in the hands and pops straight up into the air. Why is that an interception on the quarterback? Quarterback did their job, right? Why is the wide receiver, the tight end, the receiver in general not bearing some of that responsibility? So I still, look, you mentioned we're in June 7th. We've been having the same conversation since March or April about this position. We're going to have the same conversation all the way through August about this. It's like the lightning rod, and why there's Trey Lance or Sam Darnold are these enigmas. I think sometimes people forget that, don't we all root for the same team? And don't we all want the same outcome in some capacity? It's mind boggling to me. But to your point, the reporters that were there, right? The media that were there, they're doing their job. They're just reporting the outcome of the play and what they saw. And then everybody else takes it and runs to squeeze and fit their narrative.
I mean, even the defensive players were really happy about this play. Does that mean they hate Lance too? No, they're just happy for Kerry Hyder. But this is why practice and OTAs, training camp, it's so awkward because your team is playing against each other. And there's times where if there's a play like this, you don't know exactly where to place your emotions or I guess your excitement or how to properly assess the performance. Especially when you're not there, especially when you don't have all of the context. Is this offensive unit bad or is the defense that good? And I think it goes both ways at different points in time. Lance made a bad decision. From the reports, it sounded like he threw it right to Kerry Hyder. but Kerry Hyder made a great play. I mean, I think we could be happy about that, but the fact that Kerry Hyder made a great play, I hope he makes a play like that in the regular season. But they're on the same team, right? It's okay to be happy about one, or maybe you're upset that Trey Lance threw a pick. Like that's okay too. But yeah.
Here's the problem I have. If Brandon Allen is Trey Lance in this scenario, the talk of the town is Kerry Hyder made the play. It's not that you know what I mean? That Brandon Allen, his eyes were leading the defender, or ball placement wasn't great, any of those things. It's just the lightning rod that is the 49ers quarterback scenario. And it's like, I don't like laughing about it like at all, because I love this team, you know, and I love everything about it. But like, what else am I supposed to do at this point? It's just like, you know, it's crazy. And Steph, I know you and I, we talk offline, right? And we've had these conversations. Like, we're all perplexed by it, right? And the best we can do is just like, hey, set a little context, give our opinion about it, and let the chips fall where they fall. But like, I swear to you, if Kerry Hyder made that play on Brandon Allen, it's probably not even talked about in any capacity.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's just Brandon Allen. But
I mean, wasn't Brandon Allen Dan Marino yesterday by all accounts? You know what I mean?
According to Kyle, I mean, yeah, he was extremely impressive. Build the statue. But you know, look, let's talk about something positive, right? Like Lance did have a 60-yard touchdown as well, and it was beautiful, according to Grant, where he hit Kittle in stride up the sideline. And it was 7-on-7, so there was no offensive or defensive lines on the field during that portion, in which Lance was, again, a perfect 4 of 4 in 7-on-7s. But his 11-on-11 performance was somewhat of a different story, and according to Grant, it did not inspire confidence. But to be fair, he kind of said the same thing about Darnold. We'll talk more about him in a bit. And I thought it was funny too, like Tim K, who apparently was there too, speaking on the overall practice, said he thought Lance looked pretty sharp. So, hey, I mean, it depends who you ask. It depends, you know, what you're looking at, I guess. But here's the thing. Like, I'm at this point where I'm trying to take in all of the information, and I've even started to retweet, not just about Lance, you know, like if I see something about Darnold, I retweet that too. Like, I'm just trying to share and take in information about all the quarterbacks, and then I guess hope that we can all come to a conclusion or an opinion at some point that's like fair, that's based on everything that we've seen, and not just, you know, the pretty plays that we've heard of, right? So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
And Steph, I honestly think, and it's not to toot your horn, I think you do a great job of being equitable, right? Like, here's what I saw, here's what's being reported. While we use this time and this forum to get a little bit more into the opinion, it is still very factual, you know, based on the context that's provided. Again, you have different reports, right? I mean, when I read Grant's report, he was gushing about Lance until that final sentence, and it was almost playing like the perfect politician of like, but it wasn't inspiring, you know.
Yeah.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I have to be honest with you. When I think of like OTAs and I think of minicamp, I put a lot more stock into the 11-on-11 versus the 7-on-7. There's too much room to work in 7-on-7. If I take, when I'm looking for negatives or positives, especially from like the quarterback position, for the wide receivers, first of all, like, don't drop the ball, right? Like, there's little pressure, little pads, like, don't drop the ball. That's where I get frustrated. But for the quarterbacks, it's more like ball placement, right? If Kittle's running up the seam, like, was it an easy catch for him? Was it in stride? Was it it was a 60-yard touchdown. Was it a busted coverage that he was just standing there wide open and was underthrown? And, you know, those are the things that I'm looking for. Now, again, we weren't there, so you don't really get
But that's why the context matters. Like, when we do get that context, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, totally. Here's what I'll say, because I know we're going to talk more about OTAs. I have very specific, and again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I look for certain things, and I am not Grant Cohn. I am not these people. I'm not a coaching staff, right? Like, it's just what I look for and what my context is. But in all the years that I've been watching the National Football League, there has never been a positional battle that is won during OTAs and minicamp, right? Like, I'm more concerned about who's there, who dressed. What is, you know, like, what are the alignments in terms of like who's taking first team reps? You know, at left tackle in Trent Williams' absence, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
most of the veterans ain't playing. They don't want to get nicked up and hurt. I mean, kudos to Kittle that he was practicing, but a lot of them just show up, do the media tour, fun. But that lets me know like how the coaches are thinking about it. And I know we'd probably want to move on from the Lance Darnold conversation at some point in time, but like, this is why I'm still confused. Like, why are we splitting first team rep? Like, make a decision. Just make a decision and let the other one.
It's still early, right?
I mean, like, say, hey, Trey's gonna. It doesn't mean you have to stick to it. Just like appease the nonsense of the questions you have to ask every day and say, listen, Trey's gonna be the guy through camp. That's all you got to say. Darnold can take more reps, and nobody's gonna even know. You know what I mean? Like, just say it. Let's just move on. You know? I don't know. I think Kyle's having more fun than we are, to be honest with you.
He's very
sick.
well.
He's a sick, twisted man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he enjoys, like, unlike us and everyone else, I think he kind of enjoys the uncertainty or all the questions surrounding the quarterback position, because in his mind, I think he already knows what he's going to do. He just likes to keep people guessing. Yeah. But before we talk about other quarterbacks, I did want to discuss a video circulating of Greg Papa, who earlier today on KNBR, posed the question of, Brandon Allen. Like, if the 49ers are impressed by him, should they look into trading Trey Lance? And I'll play just the part of this clip here.
If Brandon Allen is as impressive as they think he is, would the 49ers be open to trading Trey Lance at some point this offseason that Trey has improved? Do you have to wait a little while? Would you do that more before the deadline? Would you do it at all? The way quarterbacks get hurt around here, you got to be careful because you wind up playing 3 just about every year except for the Super Bowl year of 2019. So,
all right. So, yeah, a lot of people are enraged about this. And to be fair, I think Greg Papa did say all this before Brandon Allen went 1 for 8 today in practice. Look, I don't mind like posing the question for the sake of discussion. I think that's completely fine because realistically, I think that if you ask me if Lance is going to be traded somewhere in the future, I would probably lean towards yes. But also realistically, I don't think it will be because of anything Brandon Allen has done. Like, I could tell you that. I think two different things there.
I mean, you saw Trent Williams airing it out today, right? Like, hey, I'm all for like, hey, let's move on from Trey. Trent looks like he could be the emergency QB. I agree with you, Steph, though. I have no qualms whatsoever with anybody proposing any question, like at all, and like, I mean, I don't want to knock Papa. He's got like the dream job, right? Sitting there at the home games and, gets to excite the crowd and the listeners, etc. Like, but, I think he's posing the question. He's not saying this is fact because he has said some of things in the past year, all of which none has come true. Right. So let's keep that in mind. Right. Like, I don't know. It just continues to fuel the fire and the speculation around like, hey, is Trey going to be here come, the first week of September? Yeah. And I agree with you. I think I'm leaning now towards that. At some point, whether it's early in the season or it could become a reality. I will always argue that it's not the move that I would make or that I think is responsible. But it's starting to feel that way. But it's just another thing that just fuels that narrative. That's all it is, in my opinion. There's no foundation to his statement. Brandon Allen, right?
Right.
Like
we're talking about Brandon Allen here.
Come on. Yeah, you know what I mean?
And once again, Emil Fergoso, who's, kind of quickly becoming one of my favorites on the timeline, is one of the, people who are at these practices, said of the Greg Papa clip, quote, Brandon Allen is not overtaking Trey Lance on the depth chart anytime soon. The only way that happens is if the 49ers trade Lance. End of story. Because, this isn't Lance versus Brandon Allen. This is Lance versus Darnold, and it's not even for QB1. Like it's for backup quarterback. So let's talk about Darnold really quick, who completed 10 of 14 of his passes between 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s. Darnold also had a 60-yard touchdown today to a tight end, rookie Cameron Latu. And Grant noted that pass was extremely similar to Lance's touchdown throw to Kittle. Darnold was also perfect during 7-on-7s. As we mentioned earlier, like that doesn't hold too much weight because there's no pressure. And as far as coverage goes, not exactly the most sticky of sorts, but he went 5 of 5 7-on-7s and 5 for 9 in 11-on-11s, with one of those incompletions being a drop from Juwan Jennings. Darnold also would have gotten sacked 3 times. Remember, they can't actually sack the quarterbacks in these practices, but it would have been in a regular game scenario. And Grant said that, Darnold was holding on to the ball for a while. So that's not something you want to see. But he also said that both Lance and Darnold didn't exactly make any big plays in 11-on-11s. And I don't know if it's just me, but it's kind of feeling like this battle or this competition, which, I don't know if we could say it's been hyped up, but like, I think there was a lot of talk about it, throughout this offseason. It's feeling a little underwhelming.
It's feeling very mid, right? Like, mid. I don't know how to.
It's giving mid.
Yeah. It's giving me very mid vibes. Yeah, this was never going to be like the Manning Brady duels of like the mid 2000s, the way it was hyped. Listen, Steph, I've said when you joined me on my show, right, that like I don't really care who the quarterback is. Like I have my opinion. I just want them to perform well, and it doesn't seem like anybody is. Yeah, is out there lighting the world on fire. I think what's more telling for me, and I'm specifically referring to Grant's report post-practice today, was Sam holding on to the ball a lot longer, which was kind of like, when did things go poorly in our offense for Jimmy when he was under center, when he'd hold on to that ball, right? So I don't want to see that. I want this ball coming out quick. And then specifically missing the open play or missing the open receiver, which was probably the initial play call, right? Target one on the initial play call anyway, and missing, because we saw years of that. I don't want to see, too much of that. It's going to happen, but like any more of that. So like a more of a negative check mark to me. Again, I put no stock. I think the touchdown did actually to Latu did happen in 11-on-11, not 7-on-7. So if I remember correctly, so that's nice, but I'm looking at that more as a plus for Latu than I am for Darnold. Getting the rookie to build some confidence. This is not Darnold's first training camp. Like Kenley, probably, if he is the greatest thrower of the football or the football that this team has ever seen, like I just need to see more. Here's the problem I have. If he's not clearly outshining, like clearly at this point, like what are we doing? Like I just don't know.
I don't think either of them are like clearly outshining each other, and that's kind of the problem. Like I'm like, man, I think we were all expecting a little bit more out of this. I kind of wonder if like Kyle would feel the same way, or I mean, maybe he's pleased with how this is going because, I mean, realistically, they're competing for backup competition, like to be the backup, right? So it's like you don't have to be a world beater to be a backup necessarily. So I don't know. Maybe this is just fine for the team. Maybe we just had very high expectations of what this was going to be. I guess I think we expected a little bit more.
I just think that they're both missing a golden opportunity for themselves, right? I think they're continuing based on, let's just call it mediocre play, right? At practice, they're continuing to fuel the fire that Brock is QB1. Like, no, I want to be really clear about this. Unless I am entirely missing, nobody has come out and said he is 100% QB1, right? They've come out and say, we are airing on that guy. We love the guy. He played so well. He's probably earned, all just conjecture, right? Like just typical sports talk, etc. And I think they have this opportunity where you have this guy on the fence, injured, coming back from an unknown in the NFL, what a UCL recovery looks like. We haven't even really seen him throw the football. We don't know what that looks like. Is he going to throw it well with shoulder pads on or with pressure in his face? Or is he going to get hit one more time and he's going to be racked up? Now it's Tommy John's. Like, we don't know that. And this is their opportunity. And I think they're dwindling. Like they're just diddling around. Like I don't think anybody's grabbing the bull by the horns. And I think that's what I'm most frustrated with from either of these guys, right? It's mid. It's just real mid. I don't know how else to say that. And that's not even like my generation's term. It's mid. I don't know what else to say.
It's also the mid of the off season, right? I mean, like they have a training camp to go. I feel like that's when things really start to heat up. So hopefully like the quarterbacks, because, at this point, both Lance and Darnold have done this a couple times. And I think they would know that training camp is when things really start to heat up and decisions start to become made. So I would hope this starts to, become a little more exciting then. But luckily, Weston, there are more things to talk about than the quarterback position with this team. I know I felt like I was starting to lose you for a bit there, but let's start with some good things. Before the offseason program really kicked off, I had an episode with Chris where we discussed who needed to step up for the 49ers this offseason. And a few of those guys that we had mentioned in that show, some of them seem to be doing just that. I mean, Steve Wilks did speak with the media after practice today, and he spoke about Ambry Thomas. And, I was a little surprised about that. I know at least one day in this mini camp or OTAs, like Grant had him in his not so good list. But according to Wilks, Thomas had a great OTAs in mini camp, which again, like I'm honestly surprised by. Maybe he just wants to pump up his confidence, or maybe in the other practices that haven't been open to the media, because not all of them are, maybe Ambry Thomas has shown a bit more. So I don't know. I guess that's encouraging.
Yeah, year 3 for number 20, if that's what he's still wearing. They change like every year at this point. Now they can go to single digits, but for Ambry, so you'd expect a little bit more maturation. I think those comments from Wilks bode well for him. And here's the truth: there's spots up for grab in this secondary, right? Outside of Charvarius, and I know Lenore Demo played really well down the stretch like really well. I don't think he's getting enough credit for how well he played in the back half of last season. But, it's a war of attrition out there. All it takes is one of these guys to go down in your defensive backfield. Like there are spots to be had on the 53 that they should be biting for. You invested a 3rd round pick in Ambry. Like the expectation was that he'd be one of those guys. So I do. Again, we're not there. Maybe the performance is like, I haven't really heard anybody rave about him in the open public, practices. Right. But maybe he's doing well. But even if Wilks is inflating the ego a little bit and just give him a little confidence, like good. That's what coaches are supposed to do. You know what I mean? So like that, if anything, that just makes me feel like Wilks is the right guy, right? Like we brought in the right guy for this defense, because that feels very much like a Saleh, D'Amico type move. Like just build the, bolster the chest and build the confidence of his squad. But we'll see. We'll see. A lot of this, like, hey, we'll see when we get really good to look. It's really easy to look good in helmet and shorts.
Yeah, exactly. And like obviously he's not going to be a starter. Like we know that. No. But he could at least be a backup, provide some depth. And so to your point, there are some spots on this roster, and I still think it'll be, an uphill battle for Ambry Thomas, just because I know that Steve Wilks did bring in a lot of secondary guys this offseason, most of which I would assume were like handpicked by Steve Wilks. So when you're going up against that, like between, Ambry Thomas being an inherited guy on this team, I think, that doesn't bode so well for him. But Wilks did acknowledge that the padded practices, because to your point, everyone can look good in shorts and no pads. Training camp will be the true test for Ambry Thomas, which Wilks did add. I'm very confident he can get it done. So I guess we'll just wait and see on Ambry.
I think that's the encouraging piece here, though, right, Steph? And I want to be very clear. Like, I still wouldn't look good in shorts and a helmet. So, like, kudos to these guys.
I mean, we wouldn't, but
yeah. But I think what's encouraging for Ambry is that by all accounts from the Steve Wilks report, I'll just call it, is more like he's going to get an opportunity, right? Like he's going to get an opportunity to shine in camp and get some reps and, tall task, though. You're going to have to line up across 11, across 19. Let's see what that looks like in camp.
Did not look great last
No,
year, I'll tell you
no.
that. But Diamador Lenore, who, I think is pretty much slated to be the guy starting outside opposite Moody Ward, he spoke with the media today, and he said he wants to establish himself as one of the best corners in the league. This is very tough task there, but he also called Steve Wilkes the godfather of DBs. That's a pretty cool nickname, but I think it also tells you that Steve Wilkes could be the game changer for the secondary for some of these guys that maybe, were fringe or maybe were underperformers in the past. I mean, I've been hearing also Samuel Womack had a good mini camp. I think Grant also listed him in his good for minicamp. And once again, like I think that's just an example of the secondary coaching, maybe being a little better this year.
Yeah. I'm so excited to watch what this defense looks like under Wilkes. I know, like we all know, his pedigree is in the defensive backfield, and I think that's candidly been a shortcoming for us outside of the front seven, over the past few years. Love Demo's bravado. This is the NFL. There's room for plenty of egos, but I think defensive backs have to carry themselves a little bit different than the rest of the players, because they honestly get beat more than they don't, right? Like that's just the nature of the position. Like to compare it to baseball, right? You hit 300 for your career, you're in the Hall of Fame. Well, that means only 3 out of 10 times you got a base hit. Like that's not really that good, right? Like in the grand scheme of things. And that's what it's like to play defensive back. So you have to have short memory. You have to be able to get right back there, and you really just can't let anybody get in your psyche. So I think the words alone show that, like, hey, he built confidence for himself coming out of last season, deservedly so. Maybe he's starting to believe it, right? Like maybe he's starting to believe in himself a little bit more, and good. I want to hear more of this, right? Like all the best. Jalen, let's go all the way back to Dion. They all thought they were the best, right? Like that's what you need to play this position competitively.
Right. Exactly. You have to have that mentality. So we'll see if it carries over onto the field once the pads come on. But, there's another battle, if you want to call it that, going on between the kickers, right? And, I'm only going to talk about Jake Moody because I think it's assumed that he's going to be the guy, right? Like, I don't think there's really a battle going on. Zane Gonzalez is still on the roster, but I think it's Jake Moody's job at this point. Yesterday, Moody did miss from 38 yards, which is, not great. Third round kicker, you want him hitting everything. But today he did have a much better day, which, we can't really ignore. He nailed a 63-yard field goal, and not even just barely. Like it sounds like it traveled a lot further than that, which is, I'm sure, encouraging. I know Grant and Mayoko have both mentioned like Moody having one of the strongest legs that, they've ever seen. And I'm sure like that's pretty hard to debate if you see it in person. The question I have is like, is that something that he can do consistently? Or I don't know, like the short kicks seem to be where he's had some of the misses. So as a kicker, you're probably more likely to have those short field goals than you are like the 50 plus, right? So we'll see if that's something that we'll see more of in training camp.
Couple thoughts. Like first of all, if you're picked as a kicker in with that comp pick in the third round, let's just call it what would be an early equivalent of an early fourth round pick. Like you better be the guy. Like you just better be the guy, right? Like it is definitely, Jake, it is your job to lose, right? So if you lose it, you lost it. Somebody didn't make the decision. I think the 50 plus, the leg strength is the added bonus, right? I mean, the last time I saw a 60 plus yard field goal made for the 49ers was when David Akers bounced 63 literally off the crossbar and in, right? Like barely cleared. So that's a nice to have. What's going to be missed is the accuracy of Robbie under 50, right? Because that's what's most important, especially in this day in the NFL. Defenses tighten up in the red zone, right? Touchdowns aren't as easily come by, as they need to. So, I need you to be money from 45 in, like money, and you can have a really long NFL career regardless of what your 50 plus, percentage is. So a little concerning, but like he's a rook, right? It's different. The NFL is different than kicking in college. I would hope optimistically, get that right. But that should be the focus. Like you boot a 63-yarder in a game. Great. Chances are it was probably like right before halftime and really didn't matter all that much. Like you need to be money from 45 and in to compete in this league.
Wasn't his nickname like, was it Money Moody or Moody Money, something like that? Like I thought that was his nickname. So
so, but missing from 38. I mean, that's just a couple yards further than an extra point. Can't be having that. Those are gimmies.
And I've kind of to your point saying like, yeah, he's a 3rd round pick, basically 4th, but like he kind of needs to be perfect and for that pick to feel validated, right? Yeah. And so hopefully he tightens it up in training camp and those 30, 40 yarders start to fall more consistently. But 49ers also worked out a 49ers rookie minicamp tryout hero, Ja'Cory Pearson, who was, a lot of 49er fans liked him, wanted the 49ers to sign him. This is 49ers' second time getting to look at him. So we'll see if they will sign him, but he did have some company today on that workout. They also worked out former Chargers wide receiver Jason Moore and a quarterback, Jack Cohn. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's funny that they're working guys out like before this far ahead before training camp, I guess. Yeah. It's like you're about to take like a 40+ day break and you're trying guys out.
I just think I love Kyle Shanahan. I'm the first one. I love everything about Kyle Shanahan. I know he gets knocked and I'll critique things, but one of the things that I love about him is just like his absolute arrogance. And I think he believes that he's got his roster figured out, right? Plus or minus a couple slots. And I think he's just trying to, plug and play. I think working out the quarterback, honestly, I think it entertains him more than it does anything else. I believe that. Like I literally believe that in my heart. But I also think like, hey, a couple wide receivers here and there, like you never know, right? Like everybody disappears for 40 days. Who stays in shape, right? Like you had an all-pro wide receiver, Deebo Samuel, admit publicly he was out of shape. How does that happen, right? So like, what if these non-all-pros that might be contributors are coming back? Like, I just think he's kind of doing the due diligence. It does seem a little funny that it's this far in advance of camp, but I don't think it's anybody that gets brought back come camp, to be honest with you. I just think he's just going to – it's a revolving door for him.
Yeah, for sure. But for the most part, like I think we covered like most of the topics from day 2 of minicamp, and I don't know if I'm ready for like not having any news about this team for 40+ days. What are we going to do? Talk about the quarterback some more? I mean,
so this is where the 49er content people are going to be focused on, yourself and myself included, right? We're going to be monitoring tweets and activities
overanalyzing
and who's courtside at what game, or who's sitting behind the dugout at a baseball game of the offseason. Oh, it's Sam and McCaffrey. Oh, Trey Lance is on the outs, right? Like that's literally what's going to happen for the next 35.
I know. Best content of the year.
It really is. But I think, if I was cautioning everyone, right, is like good news here. Walking out of minicamp and OTAs, nothing significant on the injury level that we're aware of, right? That's a plus. We have a glimpse into the mindset of, let's just say, Shanahan and Wilkes as to where some of these players might fit in terms of outside the quarterback position, of course, and, first team reps, second team reps, etc. You got a little look at some of the rookies, but I go back to what I said. Nobody has ever won their position or solidified their roster spot in OTAs or the minicamp. All that fun comes in August. So now it's also time for media, 49ers media, and all content people out there, go get your receipts ready. Right? Like if you want to be right or you want to be wrong, you got 40 days to line up your receipts, and let's find out how you did in your offseason projections.
Yes, exactly, because people will keep those receipts for sure. Well, Weston, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun, and we'll have to get you back on the pod here soon, man.
I would love it, Steph. You already know that. I love collaborating with you. I think you do a hell of a job, a fantastic job. And just so you know, this might be the first podcast I've ever gone without dropping a curse word. So I'm trying to be respectful on somebody else's platform. I don't want to hurt anybody's rep or anything like that. But a lot of fun, and really looking forward to this season. You know, I think the 49ers are the team that are just the gift that keeps on giving. Whether you're just a fan or you're looking for some content to digest.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, Weston. And thanks to all you guys that tuned in today. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. If you're an audio listener, make sure you drop a review. Love to hear from you guys. But for now, have a good rest of your Wednesday, people. Peace.